more information about investing, you may order Nightly Business Report's home video, the NBR Guide to Stock Market Strategies, by calling 1-800-535-5864. This program is available in either the VHS or DVD format.
We are PBS.
Funding for local broadcast of Nightly Business Report has been provided by viewers like you and by the following. Safe Corporation, preventing workplace injuries and helping Oregon employers manage the cost of workers' compensation insurance. Safe, on the job for Oregon.
Not so fond of your Ford? Own an abundance of Audis, or maybe you're just tired of your truck. You can support OPB's radio and TV programming with a donation of your used vehicle. Convert that surplus Subaru or rundown RV into a tax-deductible donation to OPB. For more information, call 503-244-9900 or visit us on the web at opb.org. And thanks for your support.
Next time on a special edition of Antique Roadshow.
It's every 45 that was issued on Apple Records in mint unplayed condition.
It's one of the best casual stay signatures I've ever seen.
Is that right?
You're kidding.
Get hip to tomorrow's Antique.
Join us tonight at 8 here on OPB.
Coming from director Martin Scorsese.
He's not busy being born, he's busy dying.
Everything you thought you knew about Bob Dylan is about to change. No Direction Home. Bob Dylan.
Join us tonight at 9 here on OPB.
On Nova, high atop an Andean summit, a little boy's frozen body reveals dark secrets of a lost culture.
Diablos, mira.
What mysteries lie frozen in heaven?
Tuesday night at 8 here on OPB.
1, 2, 3. I changed my drummer twice to try and get a drummer like Pete.
If you didn't see the Beatles on the Cavern with Pete Best, you haven't seen the Beatles.
He played the Cavern, gone down fantastically as we normally do. And at the end of the night, I got a message from Brian. He's basically saying, I said, Pete, I'd like to see you in the office in the morning.
Wednesday night at 8 here on OPB.
This is OPB.
Funding for local broadcast of the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer has been provided by viewers like you and by the following. The law firm of Davis Wright Tremaine, proud to support diversity in all walks of life.
New Horizons Computer Learning Centers in Oregon and Southwest Washington, providing computer and network training since 1980.
Oregon Hematology Oncology, a locally owned practice, providing personalized cancer care in an environment of compassion and support for over a quarter century.
Good evening, I'm Gwen Eiffel. Jim Lehrer is off. On the NewsHour tonight, our summary of the news. Then, after the storm, reports from Texas and Louisiana. After Houston, how should cities prepare for mass evacuations? And after the protests, the public debate over the war in Iraq.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer has been provided by...
Somewhere west of Shenyang, a teenager is stopping for dinner, which is why the soybean harvest west of Peoria is not stopping, and a soybean processor is not stopping, and a ship's captain on the west coast is stopping, but just for a while. Somewhere west of Shenyang, a teenager is stopping for dinner, a dinner rich in soy protein. At ADM, we like the idea there'll be no stopping him now. ADM, resourceful by nature.
David and Kathy just built a beautiful new home right at the water's edge.
I'll tell you the real story. I've been a professor at a local university since I was 28, and my husband's been at it longer than I have. You don't build a big nest egg on a couple of teacher salaries. You need a plan and a financial consultant who isn't afraid to roll up his sleeves.
Smith Barney, this is who we are. This is how we earn it.
And by CIT and Pacific Life.
This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
The Texas-Louisiana border region focused on rescue and recovery today from Hurricane Rita. Authorities blame 7 deaths on the storm. It came ashore early Saturday in far eastern Texas. Although the overall damage was less than feared, some areas were hard hit. Spencer Michaels has our report on the aftermath.
In low-lying parts of Texas and Louisiana that were battered by Hurricane Rita, residents were still being led to safety today. It became apparent that the Gulf of Mexico had swallowed up more land for itself in the wake of the storm. A waterlogged and wind-ravaged swath of coast along the border bore the brunt of Rita's wrath. The hurricane that roared ashore on Saturday did its most serious damage to Beaumont and Port Arthur, Texas, as well as Lake Charles, Louisiana. More than 110,000 people in Beaumont were urged not to return home. Highways to those towns were closed, and the area had no power or sewage systems. Cameron Parish, known as Louisiana's Outback, was particularly hard hit, with entire small towns and fishing villages completely inundated.
We have nothing left.
In the nearby town of Carlos, Louisiana, the Trahan family ventured back home as floodwaters receded slightly, but not much of their home was left. An estimated 95% of the population of 4,000 evacuated. Reports indicated that more than 4,000 cattle in the area may have been killed, and that up to 30,000 cows could be in serious trouble from the flooding. Just across the border in East Texas today, traffic was heavy as people tried to return to their homes. Some ignored the voluntary staggered re-entry plan implemented to avoid gridlock. All along the coast, the oil refineries escaped heavy damage, with just one of them facing major repairs before it can go back online. There were signs of life in Houston today, which was spared serious damage as streetcars and buses were up and running, offering limited service. Business owners removed boards from their shop windows, and some of the residents who evacuated began returning. Houston's Mayor Bill White.
Well, life is starting to return to normal in Houston, Texas, but there's still work to do. It's not only getting Houstonians back into our city, but also to care for our fellow Americans in East Texas and Western Louisiana who are still in distress.
Power lines are down all over the region, with 1.3 million homes currently with no electricity, some of them still experiencing outages from Hurricane Katrina a month ago.
In New Orleans, residents were allowed back into the Algiers neighborhood. They began returning last week before Rita forced them to leave again. Police and National Guard troops kept watch today as cars streamed in. For some, it was the first look at what Hurricane Katrina did to their homes. City officials hope to reopen other neighborhoods in coming days. Elsewhere, Army engineers worked to seal new breaks Rita opened in the city's flood walls. Parts of the already saturated 9th Ward flooded once again over the weekend. There were new questions today about the way federal aid is being spent in the Gulf. The New York Times reported major contracts have gone to companies represented by Joe Alba, a former Bush campaign manager and former head of FEMA. President Bush today left open the possibility he might name a reconstruction czar to oversee spending and relations with local officials.
Once these groups get up and running, they're going to have to interface with the federal government. And so I'm considering how best to balance the need for local vision and federal involvement. Now, there's going to be a lot of federal involvement because we're going to spend money wisely, I might add.
The president also called for conservation to ease pressure on gas prices, and he said the government would tap the strategic oil reserve again, just as it did after Katrina. But oil prices rose today just the same. In New York, oil futures were up $1.63 to close at $65.82 a barrel. In Iraq today, roadside bombs killed three U.S. soldiers in and around Baghdad, and 16 Iraqis were killed in separate attacks. 5 were teachers shot dead at a school just south of Baghdad. Also today, the U.S. military freed 500 detainees from Abu Ghraib prison. It was a gesture of goodwill in advance of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. Army Private Lindy England was convicted today in the Abu Ghraib prison abuse scandal. A court-martialed jury at Fort Hood, Texas, found her guilty of mistreating Iraqi prisoners and other charges. England appeared in graphic photos showing naked Iraqis in humiliating poses. She could be sentenced to 10 years in prison. Several hundred anti-war protesters marched outside the White House today. Police arrested some who staged a sit-in, including Cindy Sheehan, the California woman whose son died in Iraq last year. Last month, she led a vigil outside the president's Texas ranch. On Saturday, organizers said more than 100,000 protesters turned out on the National Mall. It was the largest such rally in Washington since the war began in 2003. We'll have more on this story later in the program. Israel launched airstrikes in Gaza today for the 3rd straight day. Jet fighters fired missiles at suspected weapons factories. That's after militants fired more than 40 rockets into Israeli towns. The violence threatened a 7-month truce bolstered by Israel's support, pullout from Gaza. A Spanish court handed down a mixed verdict today in a trial involving the 9/11 attacks. We have a report narrated by Bill Neely of Independent Television News.
It was Europe's biggest ever trial of suspected al-Qaeda supporters. The security was clear, the verdict less so. Men were jailed, but the most serious charges were thrown out. The defendants sat behind bulletproof glass, most from Morocco and Syria, 3 charged with killing nearly 3,000 people. The judges acquitted them of that, but ruled they had conspired in Spain with the leader of the attack on the World Trade Center. Imad Yarkas from Syria was jailed for helping and funding al-Qaeda members. The Spanish say he's a terrorist ringleader. Also jailed a television journalist from the Arab network Al Jazeera. He headed their Afghan bureau. He brought $4,000 there. The judges ruled he had collaborated with terrorists. 6 of the 24 defendants were acquitted. The only evidence against one, this video of the World Trade Center, taken 4 years before the attack. Spanish prosecutors are now preparing to try dozens of men for the Madrid train bombings, among them Moroccans allegedly recruited by the ringleader jailed today.
The train bombings killed 191 people in March of 2004. In Northern Ireland, independent inspectors announced today the Irish Republican Army has done away with its weapons. The IRA formally announced in July it was giving up violence. Britain insisted on that step before talks of Northern Ireland's future, but some leading Protestants said today they are not convinced the IRA has really disarmed. The United States Senate today began debating the nomination of John Roberts to be Chief Justice. He was assured of confirmation, with 2/3 of the senators already saying they'll vote yes. The chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Republican Arlen Specter, said of Roberts, quote, he has the potential to bring a new day and a new era to the Supreme Court. The confirmation vote is expected on Thursday. Senate Majority Leader Bill Frist today defended his sale of stock in Hospital Corporation of America, a company his family founded. The stock's price fell sharply just weeks after Frist ordered his trust to sell. Now, federal prosecutors and the Securities and Exchange Commission are investigating. Today, the Tennessee Republican insisted his actions were completely above board.
My only objective in selling the stock was to eliminate the appearance of a conflict of interest. I had no information about HCA or its performance that was not publicly available when I directed the trustees to sell the stock.
Frist is considering a run for president in 2008. He took no questions from reporters today, but said he would cooperate fully with investigators. Boeing reached a tentative agreement with its workers on Sunday to end a 3-week-old strike. More than 18,000 machinists will vote on a 3-year deal this Thursday. The strike focused on pension and health care concerns. On Wall Street today, the Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 24 points to close at 10,443. The Nasdaq rose 4 points to close at 2121. Actor Don Adams of Get Smart fame died late Sunday of a lung infection at a Los Angeles hospital. In the 1960s, he played the bumbling spy Maxwell Smart in the comedy. The show, the character and his shoe phone became part of pop culture with lines like, "Sorry about that, Chief." Don Adams was 82 years old. That's it for the news summary tonight. Now it's on to Hurricane Rita's destruction, post-Houston evacuation planning, and the public debates the war in Iraq. The aftermath of Hurricane Rita and its impact on communities in Louisiana and in Texas. We have a pair of reports from our correspondents on the ground. The first is from Jeffrey Kay of KCET Los Angeles, who's in Terrebonne Parish in southern Louisiana.
Residents of Terrebonne Parish on the Gulf of Mexico were largely spared the full brunt of Hurricane Katrina a month ago, but they weren't so fortunate when Hurricane Rita hit. Storm surges generated by the hurricane swamped coastal communities in the parish, erasing boundaries between bayous and neighborhoods. Floodwaters as deep as 9 feet damaged thousands of homes.
Yeah, we always get some water for hurricanes, but not this bad.
Last time I tell you, hold the traffic, thank you.
Police directing traffic kept residents, sometimes irritated ones, out of the worst-hit neighborhoods. But overall, the people of Bayou Country have responded to the floods with stoicism. These are wetlands, and its residents are no strangers to water, both to its perils and its opportunities. Many here fish or work on offshore oil and gas rigs. Houses perched on stilts are testament to the dangers of storms and floods.
You got to come back and start over again, you know? Simple. I mean, the best way to put it, you know, after everything's dried up, you know, we clean up, start all over. It's like the rest of the world, you know?
Yeah, right there is where all the kids played, you know, little Pee-wee League football.
Cleo Calais is assistant fire chief in the Montague Volunteer Fire Department. He took us through his waterlogged community out to the bayou. On the eve of the hurricane, he and other locals rushed here to try to heighten the levee with sandbags.
Did the water top this levee right here? After a while it did, because you could see all the debris on it, unless it was all wind driven, but these old driftwood wouldn't have got up there without the water having topped it after.
So it held, but it was topped.
Yeah, it held, but it was stopped later in the night.
But the big problem came when a 100-foot section of metal wall gave way. It was just one of numerous levee breaches throughout this low-lying area, where water rushed in and turned streets into canals. Calais says this area has flooded 5 times in the past 10 years.
You know, once okay, twice maybe, but 5 times in 10 years, you know, somebody's got to do something about it.
Many residents say the scope of the flooding could have been reduced. For one thing, wetlands and outlying islands that serve as barriers to storm surges have eroded due to both human and natural forces.
And whenever you're going to get no barrier islands protection, without the barrier islands protection to stop the current flow from coming north, then the people in the north is going to be flooded.
You sound angry.
I'm angry at everybody.
Others are angry about what they see as an inadequate levee system. Unlike New Orleans, the flood walls and ditches around here were engineered to contain rainwater. They're no protection from hurricane-sized storms.
Normal rain, it takes care of the water. But when the levee broke, it was just too much water to take care of and just overflowed it. It ain't gonna drain all the water coming through the levee right now.
I've been in office now for 12 years. We've been screaming about this for 20 years.
Harold LaPere is a Terrebonne City Council member. He says his parish's longtime pleas for assistance have gone unanswered.
We have been asking the state and the federal people to understand our plight, to give us the necessary resources, the necessary engineering, and to start rebuilding our coastline.
LaPierre promises to redouble his efforts, but in the meantime, parish officials are now assisting evacuees from 2 hurricanes. The Civic Center in Homer is jammed with some 400 evacuees from New Orleans, 45 miles away. And now South Terrebonne High School is housing and feeding some 360 locals. Vivian Savin, who runs the cafeteria at the high school, had been cooking in the Civic Center for evacuees from New Orleans.
And the whole time we cooked, we kept saying, this could be us. This could be us, knowing that we were spared water and wind damage.
And now?
And now, yesterday morning, it was us. I have 5 feet of water in my home, but I'm back in my cafeteria and I'll cook for those that evacuated from my community and feed those that evacuated from my community.
For those who have sought shelter at the high school, many of them veterans of previous floods, leaving this vulnerable area is not an option. That's the case for shrimp packer Norma Naka and her family.
It's home, yeah. It's home to us, and that's our livelihood. This is where we live, and this is all we've known. This is all we know. I haven't been out of Louisiana. This is it.
The storm came in over here. The Rita came in at
Protecting this area is in the national interest, says Councilman LaPierre.
26 to 27% of all of the oil and gas operations in the Gulf of Mexico come from this area. God put all of the resources in the Gulf. It put all of the seafood, all of the oil and gas in one place. We have to get the natural resources from somewhere. That's why we're here.
Officials expect that over the next couple of days, north winds will push floodwaters out of residential areas. But in the wake of Hurricanes Katrina and Rita, questions are rising over what can be done and how much should be spent to prevent future catastrophes in southern Louisiana.
Our second report comes from a hard-hit community in Texas. Elizabeth Brackett of WTTW Chicago followed this story from Bridge City. Almost all of its 8,000 residents evacuated ahead of the hurricane.
The 2 dramatic bridges give the small Texas town its name. Bridge City sits near the Louisiana border, where Hurricane Rita made landfall Saturday morning. There were few buildings in this town of just over 8,000 that didn't suffer some kind of damage. Downed trees and power lines blocked streets. Some buildings were nearly destroyed, others just damaged by the fierce winds of Rita. Bridge City escaped flooding when the feared high storm surge didn't materialize, and there were no deaths or injuries since nearly everyone got out before the storm. The city's 12 police officers, led by Chief Steve Faircloth, were the first to return to face the daunting task of making their small town livable again.
I'm pretty proud of what we've done so far. We had a good plan. It's working.
Though this town has pretty much done it all on its own.
Yes. Yes, we have.
The first problem the town faced was getting the water running.
It's empty. It drains, yeah. The valve broke, and when it broke the valve, it emptied the tank and it emptied the system.
The emergency generator should have kicked on, but the shed housing its controls collapsed. Public Works Director Jerry Jones wasn't waiting for any state or federal help. He just went to work.
First priority is to get these tanks filled so that if we do have a fire, we'll have something that we can use to put the fire out.
While the small crew tried to prop up the shed's wall, electrician Wayne Heron looked at the damage to the control panel.
I'm going to do a little more checking until they get ready.
Can it run if it's dirty and wet?
Oh, yeah. There's a limit, though, and we're pushing that limit.
They're going to be a little nervous about the first start.
I'm not going to stand in front of the switch. I'm going to stand off to the side.
After hours of work, it was time to try the generator. When it roared to life, Heron made the final preparations to flip the switch that would start the water flowing.
Are you pleased?
Well, yeah, and we'll have the system back online. Everybody will have water by tonight, and we'll have full pressure back up tomorrow. It took a little longer because of all the southern engineering we had to do, but yeah, it's fine. If somebody catches a house on fire or whatever, the fire department can put them out without any problem.
But they won't be able to drink the water?
No. We've already issued a statement. Tell them to boil the water if they want to drink it.
With the water on, the next priority was to clear the streets so emergency vehicles could answer calls. Though some trees were just too much for the town's backhoe.
These are feline mignons, I think.
Lynn Greenwell was one of the few residents who had stayed throughout the storm. A former cook in the Navy, she handled the grill for Jerry Jones's tired water department crew.
Well, in Texas, this is the way we do it. When we have a hurricane or something, whoever has the food just leaves the door open and we just go in and get the food. It's going to waste anyway because we probably won't get electricity for about 3 or 4 days.
Cooking also calmed her nerves after her harrowing night listening to the howling winds and slashing rains of the hurricane.
If they have another one, we won't be staying. I don't care what category it is.
So what did you think when you drove around town this morning?
I thought it looked like a war zone, and it was very devastating, and it's going to take a lot of money to rebuild and a lot of time. It really is. But I learned a lesson. Don't play with Mother Nature.
The exhausted police chief was using his office as his bedroom as well as his briefing room. He hadn't heard anything from FEMA, but had gotten his first offer of outside help late Saturday night. How did you get the state police? How did you get them notified that you needed help?
Actually, they finally came to me last night. A trooper walked in my office and said, "I'm here to help." I said, "Thank God."
On Sunday, Faircloth used the state police to set up roadblocks into Bridge City, both to prevent looting and to keep residents away from what was still a very dangerous situation. Not only did power lines dangle across streets, the town's volunteer fire department could barely keep up with the constant reports of gas leaks. Crystal Estolette and her partner used every technique they could think of to block the flow of gas hissing out of this broken pipeline.
These are the only ones that we can get to, the ones that everybody's hearing and calling in about. I'm sure there's a whole lot more in here that we don't even know about.
What Bridge City residents wanted to know was when they could come home. Not until power is restored, said the police chief. By Sunday, the power company had people out doing a damage assessment, but said it would be 1 to 2 weeks before repair crews could even begin what will clearly be a major repair job.
No, sir, not for about a week. It's really dangerous here. It's not a safe situation.
That was not the news Bridge City citizens wanted to hear. They overwhelmed the town's only police dispatcher with calls.
There's no public access to the town for another week or so for your safety.
At the end of a long day, the water crew was more than ready for their grilled dinner. Before eating, they did ask for a little outside help.
Father, let us not just get discouraged about what we have seen here, Father.
But everyone here knew it would be a long time before Bridge City became the vibrant community it had once been.
Still to come on the NewsHour tonight, are we prepared to evacuate major American cities? And both sides now on the war in Iraq. Cities around the country are taking a long look at their plans for mass evacuations after watching what went right and what went wrong during the hurricanes Katrina and Rita. Margaret Warner has the story.
This was Interstate 45 in Houston last week. The main freeway heading north out of the city could very well have doubled as the world's largest parking lot.
Nobody has gas. They're either closed or they're out of gas.
Gas stations ran dry in many places as Texans hit the road in record numbers, fleeing in advance of Hurricane Rita. Speeds on many clogged arteries were being clocked not in miles per hour, but hours per mile.
I'm not even going to make it to the Beltway by the time the hurricane's here. I'm going, half a mile every 2 hours.
The evacuation of southeast Texas was the largest of its kind ever attempted in the U.S., as Texas Governor Rick Perry noted.
We moved upwards of 2.5, 2.7 million people in basically a 24 to 48 hour period of time. And obviously, traffic was excruciatingly slow.
Despite the slow evacuation, the death toll from Rita has been small. A major factor in both clogging highways and saving lives is that far more citizens obeyed evacuation orders than expected. That wasn't the case when Hurricane Katrina struck New Orleans last month. Thousands there either wouldn't leave or couldn't due to lack of transportation. And some who tried to leave were thwarted by flooded highways and crumpled bridges. More than 1,000 people lost their lives in Hurricane Katrina. Forecasters had predicted the size and fury of both hurricanes, but there would be little or no warning for other emergencies like a terrorist attack. The terror attacks of September 11, 2001 triggered haphazard evacuations of New York and Washington. In New York, thousands were forced to walk out of the disaster zone as train service was stopped and traffic halted. In Washington, gridlock reigned. One major artery south out of the city was closed for hours because it passed within a quarter mile of the stricken Pentagon. So what lessons did other cities take from these hurricanes, and how has it affected their planning? For that, we turn to local officials directly involved in evacuation planning in 3 very different cities. Edward Riskin is Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice for Washington, D.C. Carlos Castillo is the Director of Miami-Dade County's Office of Emergency Management in Florida. He's also the county's Deputy Fire Chief. And Gil Kurlikowski is the Police Chief of Seattle. And gentlemen, welcome to you all. Deputy Mayor Riskin, I'll start with you. Are the problems we saw in New Orleans and Houston forcing a rethinking of Washington, D.C.'s evacuation plan?
Yeah, well, we've done a lot of evacuation planning since 2001, and there's a lot of things that we've put in place to improve our ability to move people out of the district. But every time there's a major event, such as what we've seen in the South, we certainly try to take lessons learned. And the main things that we've seen from down there that are causing us to rethink the way we approach our evacuations are, first of all, we're looking at people in the district who would not be able to, or might not have the means to get themselves out to self-evacuate. So we're doing things like looking at cross-referencing Department of Motor Vehicle records with census data to see where our concentrations of non-automobile owning people are. We're taking a second look at where special needs populations are that might not be able to move themselves. And then we're looking at the modes of transportation that we would use to assist them. We have a plan for buses to move those folks out, but we're reevaluating on a region-wide basis the availability and deployment of those buses, particularly for a no-notice event. We're also looking at water transportation as we sit on 2 rivers, the Potomac and Anacostia rivers. And finally, we're looking more seriously at rail, partnering with Amtrak and some of the other rail providers in the district to help move people out, in addition to the metro system that we have here.
All right, Chief Kurlikowski, what about in Seattle? What lessons did Seattle take from New Orleans and Houston?
Well, I think what will be happening here and across the country is people will be looking at what level official orders an evacuation or requests an evacuation. It won't be just reevaluating the routes used, because we only have one major north-south corridor here, I-5. On a good day, I-5 is massive gridlock. And the other thing is, what is the message being given? How is it communicated? We saw people at Katrina that did not evacuate, and we saw people when Mayor White and others in Houston, far more people evacuated than they had plans for. So I think there'll be some serious reconsideration of what does evacuation mean. Maybe in some cases we should be thinking about, depending on the type of disaster, shelter in place, which is a term being used a lot more frequently now.
And Director Castillo in Miami-Dade County, all the experts we talked to today said of all the areas in the country, Florida is the best prepared because you all have had the most practice. Nonetheless, did New Orleans and Houston offer any lessons for you?
Well, we have had some practice, and for us, the big turning point was Hurricane Andrew in 1992, where we really, it was a Category 5 storm that affected primarily the south end of Miami-Dade County. But since then, things like evacuating the public and getting the public to understand the need to evacuate and the reasons for it is always a challenge, because we have new people that come to the area all the time, and there's a lot of development going on, especially along the coast. So our challenge is always to make sure that they're a partner with us in being prepared, and knowing that they don't have to drive north, because Florida being a peninsula, it really driving north out of the county isn't going to help. For an oncoming storm, we expect them to just drive tens of miles, perhaps, a little further east outside of the evacuation zones.
Let's talk a little bit more about the communication problem and how people are supposed to know what they're supposed to do. And Deputy Mayor Riskin, let me begin with you. The chief in Seattle said sometimes the better thing is just for people to shelter in place. In which circumstances is that better, and how do you communicate with the public if, let's say, traditional communication's down? For instance, power goes out and people don't have televisions.
Well, one of the big pushes in our preparedness planning, and we recently, actually coincidentally, just as the storms were hitting, we had launched a region-wide citizen awareness campaign to really push this message. The citizens do have to partner with government, and one of the main messages is to have portable radio, have batteries, flashlight, water, have those basic essentials in place so that you know where to go for information.
And when you say you're starting this public awareness campaign, I mean, how are you communicating this?
This campaign is a multimedia campaign. We're doing it through community training sessions. We're doing it through television, radio, billboards, as many channels as we can to re-emphasize this message. And the silver lining of what's happening in the Gulf Coast is that it is helping to raise awareness. But we do have, in the District of Columbia, now we're rolling out throughout the region, a text alert system where people can get messages through any kind of text device, email, cell phone. We also have a reverse 911 system where we basically can send a regular telephone call to people with messages. And I think that the chief is absolutely right. Most cases, most scenarios that are likely to happen, evacuation is not what's best for the people, for the residents, and it's not what we would recommend. In fact, evacuation may put people more in harm's way than keep them from it, and they of course also inhibit the movement of emergency response equipment. So our main message to folks is to shelter in place, is to stay where they are.
Chief in Seattle, Chief Kurlikowski, what about, how different is it if you're preparing for an event that is anticipated, say a hurricane, I know you all don't have hurricanes there, versus one that is unanticipated and that strikes without warning, like an earthquake or a terrorist attack?
Well, the unanticipated one and the warning for an earthquake, of course, will be the trembling of the earth, and we just went through that, actually, not that just a few years ago. But I think there's some important things to remember, and that is talking about not communicating a sense of fear or a sense of panic to people. The face of the local official, their mayor, their police chief, at times their governor, is the face of local government that people want to trust. It really won't be the President of the United States, the Secretary of Defense. I just left our mayor who gave his 2006 budget speech, and he has vowed to re-energize this city and to make sure that we do as much outreach as possible to have all of the things in place so that we can essentially, for at least 72 hours, have families and people take care of themselves. Remember, too, that first responders, police and fire, are going to be absolutely overwhelmed by the disaster, whatever it is they're facing.
But what you're saying is, in the end, even an evacuation order or whatever the instructions are, that's really up to the local authorities.
Unless it's so widespread that actually we rethink who's going to give that order. And having grown up in Florida and been a police chief in Florida, I'm very familiar with the widespread swath of hurricane damage. And I think they may want to rethink who's going to give those large-scale orders.
Mr. Castillo, how clear are the lines of authority in Florida? For instance, you're in Miami-Dade County, which is a broad area, bigger than just the city. Who's in charge? Is it clear who's in charge?
Well, it's clear through our Miami-Dade County code that the mayor is in charge and basically the incident commander for a declared emergency or disaster here. We have a policy group following the National Incident Management System. We have a policy group that consists of me as the emergency management director, the county manager, and the mayor. And in case of a necessary evacuation, I would recommend to the manager and the mayor, who then the mayor would order this evacuation for us.
And a quick question. Go ahead. And one quick question. I know you're better prepared than others, but how would you avoid the two problems we saw in New Orleans? One, people who didn't want to leave or couldn't leave, or in this case of Houston, so many people leaving that you do have gridlock.
Well, two ways, I think, and the tough part of those three questions is the people who don't want to leave, and that changes based on their perception of a threat to them or the possible threat to them. For people who want to leave and perhaps don't have transportation, we've implemented several programs. One is when we bring people to shelters or we open shelters or evacuate from the areas, the coastal areas, we have our metro buses that pick people up at predetermined points that are marked, and they're called hurricane bus pickup points, where people can catch a bus there, and the buses their regular schedules or the regular routes are canceled, and then they just run the hurricane route. And that allows people the opportunity to come forward and to be able to leave if they want to. And the part of eliminating or preventing gridlock, you know, it's a careful balance. If we decide on an evacuation too soon and the hurricane takes a turn and turns away, the next time you ask for an evacuation, it'll be tougher for people to heed the warning. If we wait too long, then we won't be able to get out the 400,000 people that must evacuate. So our purpose in getting that message out is we tell people early on, if you live in an evacuation zone, now's the time to leave. Leave early so that there's still time. We hope that they've made arrangements before the storm and have a plan on where they're going to go.
And very briefly to you, Mr. Riskin, whose responsibility is it to have a place to go? Is that something the city of Washington, D.C. is arranging, or is it up to individuals to know if they could get out where they would go?
Primarily, it's a responsibility of individuals. Since the District of Columbia is relatively small, most people evacuating will leave the district. We partner with Maryland and Virginia to establish shelter sites, but it's really, ultimately, it's up to the individual to know where they're going to go.
All right, gentlemen, thank you all three very much.
Thank you.
Speaking out against and in favor of the war in Iraq, we begin with this report from Kwame Holman.
Hundreds of anti-war demonstrators rallied today just outside the gates of the White House. Dozens were arrested, including Cindy Sheehan, the California mother whose son Casey died in Iraq last year and who staged her own 26-day vigil outside the president's ranch in Texas last month in protest. Today's demonstrations were a continuation of the massive protests that formed in the nation's capital over the weekend. Police estimated the size of the crowd at 100,000 or more. Organizers argued there were 3 times as many. Whatever the number, Saturday's march and rally against the continued U.S. military presence in Iraq was the largest such demonstration since the war began.
War! It's a go state!
Buses brought them to Washington from all 48 contiguous states. This family traveled from New Mexico.
I think it's important for them to know that when something is wrong with your government, you have to stand up for it.
And for the first time in 10 years, demonstrators were granted a permit to stage their protest directly in front of the White House. President Bush was not in Washington this weekend, but that did not stop the crowd from making the president the target of their anger.
Hey, Bush, what do you say? How many kids did you kill today?
Supporters of the president's policies in Iraq were vastly outnumbered this weekend. Although several thousand turned out for a Pentagon-sponsored march in support of the troops 2 weeks ago, a rally yesterday drew only 400 to 500. Yet some challenged the anti-war demonstrators during Saturday's march, with police barricades keeping the two sides apart.
Troops come home now, all the sons that are dead for nothing, and nothing's going to be finished.
This morning, before her arrest outside the White House, we talked with Cindy Sheehan about the opposing positions Americans have taken on the war.
Every American has a right to stand up for what they believe in. You know, if I don't agree with them, they still have that right. And if they don't agree with us, we still have the right to stand up as Americans. And we believe what we're doing is patriotic.
Thanks, Cindy. Sheehan was on Capitol Hill, where she joined a group of anti-war demonstrators from Indiana who had arranged a meeting with their home state senator, Richard Lugar.
I'm Nick Ignace from Munster, Indiana.
Karen Jacob, Bristol, Indiana.
Lugar is chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and these constituents know he is among a small group of senior senators to whom the Bush administration pays particular attention.
We're here to clearly ask for the U.S. military to be withdrawn from Iraq.
My own view is one of attempting to support the Iraqi constitutional process with recognition that as that succeeds, we had the president of Iraq here in the Senate last week, that they will request our departure in sequence as they are able to take hold of their affairs. And it seems to me that that is appropriate.
Senator Lugar promised the group he would review legislation in the Senate that would set a specific date for withdrawal of U.S. troops from Iraq, but he said he would not commit to support it.
Now, taking it to the streets, the war in Iraq and the American tradition of protest. Nancy Lesson is co-founder of Military Families Speak Out, an organization of families with relatives in the military. Her stepson is in the Marine Reserves. Carol Phillips is a Vietnam veteran herself. Yesterday, she took part in a Washington demonstration in support of the troops and the war. Her son is in the Navy. And they're joined by Alexander Bloom, a professor of history at Wheaton College in Massachusetts. His upcoming book is The End of the Tunnel, The Vietnam Experience and the Shape of Contemporary American Life. Nancy Lesson, the CNN USA Today poll that came out last week said that 63% of Americans favor immediate withdrawal from Iraq. I'll ask you, and then I'll ask Carol Phillips, why are they right and why are they wrong?
Well, we said it was wrong for the U.S. to be invading Iraq. It's wrong for the U.S. to be occupying Iraq. There's no right way to do a wrong thing. So we're saying the best way to support our troops is to bring them home now and take care of them when they get here, and never send our loved ones, our troops, off into a war based on lies.
Carol Phillips, why are they right, why are they wrong?
Well, I disagree with what she said, because I truly believe our president, the commander-in-chief of our troops that are over there right now, did not go into this war based on lies. He went into this war as the other presidents, President Clinton and Kerry, the candidate, everybody had the same information. I just thank God that we have a president now that's willing to take a stand instead of letting our men and women in uniform continue to be battered, to be blown up, to be shot at, and nothing be done about it.
Do you feel like the anti-war sentiment is growing, as these polls suggest?
And, no, I don't. I believe the news media is blowing it up again. You can get numbers however you want to get your numbers. You can talk to a lot of people and get the numbers that you want to get. I truly do not believe that most of Americans do not support our president and our troops. And so as I said, I met one of the anti-war protesters, and I told them, I said, you're not going to have an easy time of it this go around. I remember the Vietnam War. I remember I was in the Army during the Vietnam era. I remember how they treated our men and women when they came back, and I see that starting to happen again.
What did that person say back to you when you said that?
Nothing.
Nothing. What do you say back to her when she says that?
We marched on Saturday in a contingent with 300 military families from 42 states. There were about 25 Gold Star families whose loved ones have died as a result of this war. We were with about 40 returned Iraq war veterans, and in a contingent with hundreds and hundreds of veterans from other eras. And we were all saying, support our troops, bring them home now. And what we feel is that the hundreds of thousands who marched with us were supporting our troops, were listening to us as families who have loved ones
in harm's way or about to go into harm's way.
Why isn't withdrawal right now at this time, as you would like to see the administration do? Why isn't that cutting and running?
We don't see it as cutting and running at all. We see it as getting out of where we should never have been. This is the 922nd day of a war that shouldn't have started. There are 1,918 of our troops who have been killed, tens of thousands of Iraqis, and we do not think that the presence of 135,000 troops with guns is a solution in Iraq. It is, in fact, the problem, and we do believe that there is a lot that this country needs to do for the people of Iraq, and that is in terms of assistance helping rebuilding and helping clean up the depleted uranium.
And the flip side of that question for you, Carol Phillips,
isn't it nice?
Is why I'd like to get it all in. Is why what's the argument for staying in an open-ended conflict?
Well, because the job isn't done. We left Vietnam before the job was done. We should not leave the Iraqi people hanging. Oh, it's wonderful to say we should help them and build, and that's what we are doing, by the way. You don't hear that on the TV, on the major news networks and stuff. They are helping to build. Unfortunately, people like this group and others are feeding into the insurgency and giving them hope that they can do and they can beat down the American people. And we're here to say, no, you can't. Yesterday, we were a small contingency. I'm a small person, but we have very loud voices, and we're going to let people know that we are not going to give in to them. We're going to let the insurgency know the American people are not going to give up on the Iraqi people. I was with, I believe his name was Mr. Quayle, the one that took the cross from Cindy Sheehan's group. And I don't want to see those people that have already died die in vain. And those people have fought hard for, and they died. And the one thing that's different in this war is that not one of these people are draftees. They have all joined on their own free will.
Let me bring Professor Bloom into this. You've heard us talk about the loud and competing voices on this issue. How significant are these kinds of protests, these fundamental disagreements in a time of war over the years?
Well, I think they've changed in recent years. In fact, the Vietnam War and the anti-war movement in Vietnam have changed the way Americans look at war. There's not the unanimity that there was in World War II. And we've had this debate going on since even before the war began. In the run-up to the war, there were big demonstrations in the streets of America. And so I think it's been a continuing pattern all the way through. One of the things I think that's striking is the degree to which Americans are increasingly thinking of the Iraq War as a mistake, that it's been much sooner in this process than it was in the Vietnam War time, when it took actually many more years, almost 3 times as long, to get to the same point where the significant numbers of almost 60% of the American people are now saying the war is a mistake.
Is that a reflection of people changing their minds more quickly, or is that a reflection of the fact that people just communicate differently now than they did 40 years ago?
I think it's both. I think the challenges that were raised to the Bush administration's argument for war came more quickly than the ones that came to the Johnson administrations about Vietnam. And I think that we do communicate more quickly. I think we have a new way of sort of spreading the word for all aspects, for the demonstrations, for the information. People go to the web. People are connected in different kinds of ways.
Marching on Washington is a tried and true tradition, whether it's for civil rights or anti-war protests or about jobs or about anything. The question, I guess, becomes, what's the point? Does it have an effect? Has it had an effect? Can you think of examples where it's changed policy?
I think it is. I think it certainly changed it in the Vietnam War era. I mean, it was pretty clear that, in retrospect, we know that both President Johnson and President Nixon were very aware of what was going on. There's that famous moment when Nixon goes to the Lincoln Memorial to talk to the demonstrators. Johnson is very intent on this. It's not so clear that the Bush administration is as concerned on a day-to-day basis, but they can't be pleased by the poll numbers. Just to dispute a second what something was said before, I mean, these are survey numbers done by representative organizations of a nonpartisan way. I think those numbers are accurate,
but also,
and they can't be pleased by that.
Well, if I can just follow up on that point, also, I wonder if email and weblogs and this whole technological way people have of ginning up support for one point of view or the other might tip opinion.
Some way, but I think most of those things tend to, they maybe email to the converted or email to the choir. I mean, I think the people who are on the anti-war websites and the email listservs get their information. The people who support the troops are getting their information. I'm not sure that the web is being used for a lot of crossover in that sense. I think it's more of an organizational and informational tool to people of your own side of the movement.
Nancy Lessin, is there room for honest disagreement on an issue like this?
Well, absolutely. I do want to say that military families, no matter where we stand, share an awful lot in common. When our loved ones are in harm's way, we wait for the emails. We are afraid about the knock that may come on the door. We, send cookies and brownies. There, a lot of the media have really tried to separate us, but there's much we share in common. I think that there's an important dialogue and debate that has to happen in this country. And I will say that because 1,918 servicemen and women have died, that it doesn't make any sense to have more die. And we are seeing 2 servicemen and women die on average every day. Next month, 60 more dying. How is that making anything better? In fact, it is time to end this war and bring them home now and take care of them when they get here.
Is there commonality here in this argument?
Not in my opinion, because yes, we do have, we do have the common that we love our family members and we don't want that knock on the door, and that's why these people that are doing the anti-protest, or the protesting, are making it to where I might have that knock on that door because they're feeding into the insurgency. I don't want that. I don't want that knock on that door. I don't want my son to be in harm's way. I don't want to be in war. But
you think this will put your son in
I think this is putting my son in harm's way. And people that say they speak for the military families or that they're veterans and stuff, shame on them for putting their fellow family members, their fellow service, airmen, Marines, Coast Guard, whatever, in harm's way by doing what they're doing. Of all people, they should know better.
Professor Bloom, in years past, there have been these protests, there have been these objections, yet if the protesters, no matter how many of them show up and get arrested, they fundamentally disagree with the policies of the administration in power, who's listening?
Well, I think we're all listening, and I think there's something in a democracy about the numbers of people taking to the streets, speaking in a way that does have an impact. It may not be immediate. You may not find people saying, oh, I'm the president, or senators like Senator Lugar saying I'm wrong, but there's a kind of incremental growth, and we saw that in Vietnam, and I think we're seeing it here, that it sort of moves incrementally forward to a critical mass.
Professor Alex Bloom, Nancy Lessin, Carol Phillips, thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Again, the major developments of the day, the Texas-Louisiana border region focused on rescue and recovery from Hurricane Rita. In New Orleans, residents were allowed back into the Algiers neighborhood. And Army Private Lindy England was convicted in the Abu Ghraib